Imagine if ChatGPT had such an effect on society that it caused a revolution, or ChatGPT being used to organize a revolution. In this video, we're going to explore how AI is fueling political instability and potentially setting the stage for civil unrest. You'll discover the shocking ways that AI could be weaponized by both governments and revolutionaries. Don't miss out on this crucial information about the future of society, because our lives hang in the balance. Most people haven't accepted the fact that in 2020, Western society passed from an age of stability into an age of revolution. But it happened, and we're going to talk about it. I'm Evan Goldstein. I'm a licensed professional engineer, and I'm a data scientist. I'm building the AI Capitalist channel to describe how you can arm yourself for the AI revolution. I want to point out that I actually released this video about a year ago, but I'm re-releasing it because of the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I had mentioned in a previous video, I'd referred to this video, yesterday's video. So I wanted to just come out with this because I go through a lot of the data and information about this theory of cyclical history. And I think a lot of people are starting to feel it. When I first made this video, it wasn't really something that you felt in your bones. There was this looming danger. Now I think people are starting to get that feeling, get the heebie-jeebies on the political and military situation in the country. So I thought I'd repost. But flesh and blood human history hasn't stopped just because we've got this great new tool. Actual political revolutions involving gunpowder, civil war, blood in the streets, and state collapse are still a very real possibility. In fact, AI is going to have a major impact on the period of instability we've entered into. And yes, this isn't so theoretical these days. I'm talking about you in your country right now. As for me, I grew up in the United States, and my formative years were in the 1990s. It was pretty much the opposite of revolutionary. The West had just won the Cold War and was confidently striking out across the world with capitalist expansion through globalization. America's institutions were strong. Everyone agreed that elections were fair, and young people coming of age felt that they had every opportunity to strike it rich. Or not, and just get a decent job and live a decent life. Now go read any news website today and tell me any of this is true. History operates in cycles. Some pioneering historians have been using a technique called cliodynamics to map out cycles of political stability and decay or revolution. Cliodynamics is a field of study that applies mathematical modeling to complex systems to the study of history. Obviously, this lends itself very well to data science and artificial intelligence, which is what the AI Capitalist channel is all about. We're going to look at the work of Peter Turchin, the author of The End Times, and Neil Howe, author of The Fourth Turning. Both of these works deal with using cliodynamics to predict periods of instability, and both of them conclude that we, here in Western countries, have entered one right now. Peter Turchin and Neil Howe have identified several key indicators that signal a country's progression toward political instability and potential revolution. They both conclude that the root cause of revolutions seems to be growing wealth inequality. It's not so much poverty itself. The poor American with running water, air conditioning, and cable television is still wealthier than the richest person in ancient Mesopotamia. The bottom majority sees its economic position eroding, while the upper 10%, and especially the upper 1%, and especially the 0.001%, see their incomes constantly, rapidly increasing. The lower earners and less wealthy individuals aren't idiots. They can see what's happening. You can see from this graph that the United States has gone from one of the most wealth-equal societies in world history back in the 1950s to one of the least today. Wealth inequality is caused by stagnant wages combined with inflation, and historically, stagnant wages plus inflation equals revolutions. Usually this results in other social effects that turn up in the statistics as well. The most obvious of these is the age of first marriage for men. As income inequality continues to skyrocket, young men are unable to build up enough wealth and status to attract a mate and start adult life. When men are blocked from beginning their adult life, they tend toward radicalization and violence. The key indicator is that when the average age of marriage for men exceeds 28, this has always triggered a war in history, either against an external enemy or an internal civil war if there's no outside bad unite or whatever. As of this year, the age of marriage for men has now reached. Both Turchin and Howe look at other indicators that span economic, social, and political domains. Another crucial economic indicator is what Turchin terms elite overproduction, where there's an excess of young graduates with advanced degrees compared to available elite positions. Social and political indicators include declining trust in institutions, escalating public debt, and increasing polarization between different social groups. Also introduces the concept of a wealth pump, a system where wealth is transferred from the many in the lower earning incomes to a chosen few in the higher earning incomes, leading to popular immiseration and elite overproduction, and a significant decline in relative wages compared to GDP. Both Turchin and Howe emphasize the cyclical nature of these trends. Turchin's model predicted a spike in political instability at around 2020. Howe describes generational cycles, with the current period being a crisis phase. These factors tend to reinforce each other, creating feedback loops that intensify instability over time. And just driving around the United States, I'm seeing massive homeless encampments, Midwestern cities that become like ghost towns full of drug-addicted miscreants, and an overall feeling of extreme political hostility. Let's start with a hard truth. Revolutions are slow and quiet until they're not. And they don't always involve pitchforks and guillotines at first. We're talking social, cultural, political, and economic upheavals that can turn your business model on its head overnight. Now here's where it gets interesting. Technologies have always played a role in these revolutions, but today with AI, it's a whole new ballgame. The most important technologies driving these revolutions aren't weapons, they're information or misinformation. AI is entering into one of these indicators. The big indicator is a combination of inflation with wage stagnation. Wage stagnation is caused by excess competition. We've watched population growth since the 1950s. In the 1950s, the United States had one of the most even wealth distributions in the world. Today, it's one of the most uneven wealth distributions in history. A lot of this has to do with just constantly devaluing the value of labor. There's always a natural population growth that happens during peacetime, and so inequality always grows as there are more and more people competing for the same number of jobs, or the number of jobs being produced is constantly increasing, but not at a fast enough rate to accommodate the increasing population. So wages go down. Also, women have come into the workforce. We have automation, but now we have AI, which is going to eliminate whole swaths of jobs, likely. AI is directly feeding into this trend, causing the instability. Now, when the revolution's getting going, if you want to start a revolution, whether it's changing the way we make clothes or toppling a government, you need three things. You need a narrative, a way to spread it, you need a method to organize your followers. A good example of a previous revolution would be Martin Luther. He posted his 95 Theses, problems with the Catholic Church, onto the door of a local church, and that was the 16th century equivalent of a Twitter thread that broke the internet. Throw that into an environment of political instability, inequality in a corrupt religious world, and boom, the Christian Reformation was born, with all of the crazy wars that came out of it as well. If we move ahead to World War II, the home front got its information from carefully curated headlines in a few major newspapers. Now fast forward to the Vietnam War. Suddenly, Joe Average could watch the horrors of war on his television while eating his TV dinner at home. That visual gut punch fueled the anti-war movement and pushed for social change under the mantra of peace, love, and understanding. But that was the 1970s, when a computer was the size of a building. In this new world of instability, violence, and revolution, how are the new cognitive tools of AI going to affect the revolutionary movements that we're already starting to see? The internet has taken the collapse of time and space to a whole new level. Anyone, anywhere, anytime can kick off a revolution from their couch. It's like we've gone from horse-drawn carriages to teleportation overnight. Radicals with a more technical bent have the ability to create AI agents and bots that can act like humans. If you can define a bot that can imitate and reword the thesis of his revolutionary ideology, a radical could have an automated system argue a million people over to his position while he was busy stirring up trouble somewhere else. Likewise, for arming and acting, revolutionaries used to rely on secret communications and training abroad. I remember when the book The Anarchist's Cookbook came out, describing how to organize and arm a revolution, back when I was in high school. It was extremely controversial, but a nut job friend of mine got a hold of it. We all got a kick out of some crazy things the author talked about. In retrospect, it just seemed comical and silly to talk about revolutionary actions in the world of political stability where we were all middle-class kids with bright futures. Today, something like that could fall in more receptive eyes. But now, forget printed books. The internet can spread information everywhere. And now encryption, once available only to states, is now available to individuals. The CEO of Telegram, Pavel Durov, was recently arrested in France. He was charged with spreading illicit messages, drug running, and money laundering. However, there are many in the tech community who suspect that he was actually arrested for refusing to give governments a backdoor to hack into Telegram communications, which are encrypted. WhatsApp has also faced legal attacks in India, Brazil, as well as Western countries like the UK and the United States for refusing to offer backdoor access to governments. What this tells us is that if the governments are upset enough to take action, it's probably a pretty good hint that these apps are in fact cryptographically secure, which means that radicals do in fact have the ability to communicate securely across the world. Now, you might be thinking, great, faster, easier revolutions means more change, right? Not so fast. See, when everyone's shouting, it's hard for any one voice to be heard. We've got so many would-be revolutionaries that it's getting harder to rally enough people to make real change stick. Remember the Arab Spring? It was supposed to be the dawn of a new democratic era in the Middle East. In Egypt, revolutionaries were communicating and planning the gatherings and violent demonstrations at various locations using social media in order to evade the lower tech police who struggled and eventually failed to keep up with and quash the movement. But actual change, it didn't quite pan out that way. Egypt started out as a military dictatorship, moved over to a totalitarian Islamic dictatorship, went right back to being a military dictatorship, just with a new cadre of iron-fisted tyrants in uniform. It turns out that starting a revolution is easier than ever, but actually driving change, that's hard. And if you're enjoying looking into the abyss of digitally fired revolution, to do me a solid and smash that like button. Hitting like helps us overthrow the established YouTube channels and delivers power to the people, or at least to you and me. I thank you for your support. AI does offer destabilizing radical and revolutionary factions in society the ability to better recruit, organize, and act, but they also give governments greater powers as well. For 21st century revolutionaries, elephant in the room is surveillance. This data includes people's behavior, associations, and opinions. In the good old days of the 1970s James Bond films, you had to have some idea of whose phone you wanted to bug or which suspicious character needed to be surveilled. But now that system has been reversed. Governments which oppose revolutionaries are able to watch their citizens and people around the world like hawks, collecting warehouses full of data. Machine learning AI can give governments the ability to process all of this information on people's behavior, their associations, and their opinions. This information can be used to suss out patterns within the data and identify potential threats to the powers that be. When Stalin moved from revolutionary to dictator of the Soviet Union in the previous century, his forces began hunting down and killing anyone who posed a threat. It wasn't so much that you had to actually be a counter-revolutionary, as the Soviets termed anyone who didn't like communism. No, you just had to have the potential to someday be a threat, and you and your family were gone. The problem with surveillance in the pre-AI days was that there was just way too much information to actually review. By the end of the Soviet Union, around 10% of the population held membership in the Communist Party, and about as many were employed by spy agencies to monitor their neighbors. But it wasn't enough. Imagine if Stalin had machine learning algorithms at his fingertips that could monitor, track, and analyze every association, every action, every writing, every conversation that you ever had. As we move further into the politically unstable and revolutionary period in our own history, existing governments, even those that we think of as free and developed, will likely lean more and more heavily on these machine learning tools to monitor their populations and repress radicals. So AI does give governments more power to control their populations, but it also gives the populations more ability to organize against their government. How this plays out would depend on the nature of the fracture. In the case of the United States, if the government were to fracture into Republican and Democratic governments, with all the tools, organizations, and resources that governments have, that could result in one type of. If it were instead a single unified government against more and more individual radicalized cells, as during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, you would see asymmetric warfare. Those individual groups that best deploy AI will have the best chance of altering the situation. In this environment, don't underestimate the power of real-world actions. In a digital age, sometimes the most impactful moves are the ones made in the physical world. We know from studying history and looking at the indicators that we're in a period of extreme instability, and throughout history, the only way to stabilize a society that is caught in this cycle has been extreme bloodshed. The only very rare exceptions to that rule came when the fracturing society was able to recognize the threat and come to some agreement on how to better equalize the economic situation prior to the act of real violence. That being said, Marxist and interventionist governments tend to make inequality worse. The change in awareness has to come from the ground up, not the top down. Now, I'm a techno-optimist, but as you can probably tell from this podcast, I'm a social pessimist. I'm not too confident that people are even aware of how dangerous the cracks forming in society actually are. That's why I'm making this video, to perhaps raise a little bit of awareness. Here's hoping it has some effect.